When my foster parents, the Hilgrams, lost their adopted daughter, Poppy, to her birth mom, Mrs. Hilgram locked herself in the bathroom for 6 hours, then said, "We'll find children who can't be taken away." They started adopting kids with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and seizure disorders. But when Carriette started walking after therapy worked, I caught Mrs. Hilgram switching her muscle relaxants to keep her wheelchair bound. Then I found her journal with entries like Thomas asking too many questions, may need to accelerate his anxiety disorder. I was 12 when my foster parents, the Hilgrams, lost their adopted daughter, Poppy. She'd been my sister for 3 years, not by blood, but by breakfast cereal arguments and shared nightmares about before. The day her birth mom showed up with custody papers, Mrs. Hilgram smiled so hard I thought her face would crack. "We're so happy she's reuniting with her real family," she said, gripping Mr. Hilgram's hand until her knuckles went white. Poppy left crying. Mrs. Hilgram locked herself in the bathroom for 6 hours. That night I heard them talking through the heating vent. "We gave her everything," Mrs. Hilgram whispered. 3 years, ballet lessons, private school. That ungrateful woman just took her. Mr. Hilgram's voice was steady. "We'll adopt again. Find children who really need us. Children who can't be taken away," she corrected. 2 months later, they brought home Carriette. Carriette was perfect for them. Severe cerebral palsy, no living relatives, a ward of the state nobody else wanted. She could barely speak, needed help eating, couldn't walk without her special braces. The Hilgrams transformed overnight. Every therapy appointment was a celebration. Every small improvement was documented, photographed, shared on their Facebook. "Our forever daughter," Mrs. Hilgram would caption every post. But then Carriette started getting better. The new therapy was working. She took 5 steps unassisted, then 10. Her speech therapist said she might be able to attend regular school next year. I should have noticed how Mrs. Hilgram's smile tightened at the news, how she started scheduling fewer therapy appointments, claiming Carriette was too tired. They adopted Joe next. Down syndrome, heart condition, sweetest kid you'd ever meet. Then came Rosie with her seizure disorder. Then Ben, who was blind. Our house became a medical foster home, except the Hilgrams weren't fostering, they were collecting. I watched them turn our home into something between a hospital and a prison. Safety locks on everything, cameras in every room for monitoring seizures, a medicine cabinet that looked like a pharmacy. They hired private nurses who never asked questions about the dosages or why improvement charts suddenly flatlined. The first time I saw Mrs. Hilgram switch Carriette's medication, I didn't understand. She was filling the weekly med organizers, humming some church song. When she thought I wasn't looking, she swapped Carriette's muscle relaxant for something else. Carriette's progress stopped within a week. The doctor couldn't understand it. "Sometimes these things plateau," he said, while Mrs. Hilgram dabbed at her eyes. "We'll love her no matter what." That's when I started watching closer. Joe's heart medication got mixed up with something that made him dizzy and weak. Rosie's seizure medication doses got accidentally increased until she could barely stay awake. Ben's eye surgery kept getting postponed because he'd mysteriously develop infections right before. They were keeping them sick, keeping them dependent, keeping them forever. I tried telling my social worker during our monthly check-in. She looked around at our clean house, the wall of adoption certificates, the therapy schedules on the fridge. "The Hilgrams are model parents," she said. "You're lucky to be here. Some kids would cull for this stability." Stability, right. The breaking point came with Carriette's birthday party. 16 candles on a princess cake, but she couldn't blow them out because Mrs. Hilgram had doubled her muscle relaxants that morning. "She's having a bad day," she explained to the guests, all other adoptive parents from their support group. "The disease is progressing. We're just grateful for every moment." I watched Carriette try to speak, her eyes sharp and aware even as her body betrayed her. She knew. God, she knew what they were doing to her. That night I found Mrs. Hilgram's journal. 5 years of entries, detailed notes about medication, adjustments, research on conditions that would qualify for permanent disability, a list of adoption agencies specializing in special needs children, and worse, so much worse, her plans for each kid. Carriette, increase baclofen until walking regresses completely. Look into selective dorsal rhizotomy reversal. Joe, research Dr. G interactions that mimic heart failure, non-fatal but limiting. Consider international adoption, less oversight, more grateful. The final entry made me vomit. Thomas asking too many questions, may need to accelerate his anxiety disorder. Dr. Morrison says he could qualify for residential treatment if symptoms worsen. Would miss him, but 6 is getting crowded. Thomas, that's me. I photographed every page with my school tablet, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it steady. Uploaded everything to 3 different cloud accounts. Started recording conversations on my phone. She was going to substance me next. Make me crazy so nobody would believe me. Ship me off to some institution where I'd scream the truth into padded walls. Tomorrow is Joe's cardiac appointment. Mrs. Hilgram already prepped his special vitamins for the week. I counted them. Twice the normal dose of something that isn't his usual medication. She's escalating. I can't wait anymore. Can't gather more evidence while my siblings suffer. Tonight, after she does her final bed check, I'm sending everything to the police. The police station's website loaded slowly on my tablet screen. My fingers hovered over the submit button for their anonymous tip form. 3 different cloud accounts held the evidence, but I needed to make sure someone would actually look at it. Someone who wouldn't just call the Hilgrams first. Mrs. Hilgram's footsteps creaked overhead. Her nightly routine never varied. Bathroom, check on each kid, then her bedroom by 10:30. I had maybe 20 minutes before she'd noticed the tablet's glow under my door. I typed quickly, attaching the journal photos and audio recordings. The form wanted details, location, names, specific allegations. Each word felt like a betrayal and a lifeline at the same time. These people had taken me in when nobody else would. They'd also planned to destroy my mind to keep their secret. The upload bar crawled across the screen. 47%, 48%. The house's old Wi-Fi struggled with the file sizes. Carriette's birthday video alone was huge. 40 minutes of her trying desperately to communicate, while Mrs. Hilgram smiled and told guests about regression. A door opened upstairs. Too early. Mrs. Hilgram never finished her rounds this fast. I culled the screen and shoved the tablet under my pillow, heart hammering. Her footsteps paused outside Joe's room longer than usual, then continued toward mine. The doorknob turned slowly. I forced my breathing to stay even, deep, like I'd been asleep for hours. Light from the hallway sliced across my face. "Thomas?" Her whisper was gentle, concerned. The same voice she used when talking to doctors about our conditions. I didn't move. After what felt like forever, the door clicked shut. Her footsteps retreated, but not toward her bedroom, toward the stairs, going down. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed the tablet. The upload had stalled at 73%. The anonymous tip form had timed out. I'd have to start over, and Mrs. Hilgram was downstairs doing God knows what, probably checking her journal, making sure it was still hidden behind the cookbooks where she thought nobody would look. The medicine cabinet was down there too. Tomorrow's doses already measured out in their little paper cups. Joe's cardiac appointment was at 9. If she'd really doubled his medication, he might not even make it to the car without collapsing. I crept to my door and cracked it open. The downstairs lights were on, casting shadows up the stairwell. Cabinet doors opened and closed. The med bottle rattle I'd learned to fear. Then silence. Her footsteps started back up the stairs. I dove for my bed, tablet hidden, eyes closed. This time she didn't stop at my door. Her bedroom door shut with its familiar click. I gave it another 10 minutes before trying again. The upload had failed completely. The Wi-Fi had disconnected. I'd have to go downstairs, closer to the router, risk being caught in the open. But Joe's appointment was in 11 hours. If I waited until morning, it would be too late. The stairs had their own language after years of sneaking down for water or snacks. Third step creaked on the left side. Seventh was solid. Skipped the ninth entirely. I made it to the kitchen without a sound. The router blinked in the corner. Full signal strength. I restarted the upload, watching the percentage climb. The medicine cabinet stood open. Tomorrow's pills arranged in rainbow rows. Joe's cup sat front and center. White pills that definitely weren't his usual pink ones. I couldn't let him take those, but if I threw them out, she'd know someone had been down here. If I switched them for his real ones, she'd notice the color difference. Unless the sugar bowl sat on the counter. White crystals, roughly medium-sized if you squeeze them together. Working quickly, I dumped Joe's pills into my pocket and replaced them with sugar pressed into vague med shapes. In the morning rush, with him fighting her like always, she might not notice. Upload complete. Form submitted. A confirmation number appeared that I memorized before clearing the browser history. Now I just had to make it through tomorrow without Mrs. Hilgram realizing what I'd done. I turned to head back upstairs and froze. Carriette's wheelchair sat in the living room doorway. She was supposed to be asleep, knocked out by her evening meds, but her eyes were open, tracking me with that sharp awareness everyone missed. She couldn't speak well, but she could point. Her finger aimed at the medicine cabinet, then at my pocket where Joe's pills bulged. Then she smiled, actually smiled, and nodded. She knew, had probably known for years, trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate while her mind screamed the truth. Why does Mrs. Hilgram need to check Thomas's room right when he's uploading evidence? Is she already suspicious of him or just doing her usual control routine? The timing feels oddly convenient that she'd change her pattern tonight of all nights. How many times had she tried to tell someone? How many people had patted her head and praised her for trying to communicate while missing the desperate message? I walked over and knelt beside her chair. Her hand was already moving, spelling something in the sign language her speech therapist had taught her before Mrs. Hilgram decided it was too advanced. Help us. 2 words that broke my heart. I took her hand and squeezed gently. I'm trying, I whispered. I sent evidence to the police. They'll come. She shook her head. Urgent now. Her fingers spelled faster. She knows. Heard you. Upstairs. My blood turned to ice. Mrs. Hilgram had heard me in my room. The tablet. The typing. She'd gone downstairs to check something. Probably her journal. Tomorrow she'd accelerate whatever plan she had for me. The anxiety medication. The residential treatment. I was out of time. Carriette's fingers moved again. Others know too. We all know. Of course they did. Joe might have Down syndrome, but he wasn't stupid. He'd probably figured out the med swaps ages ago. Rosie stayed conscious through her seizures more often than not. Ben's hearing had sharpened to compensate for his blindness. He'd heard every conversation, every plan. We were all prisoners here, but only I could do something about it. Only I could walk out that door, find help, make someone listen. But if I ran now, in the middle of the night, where would I go? Who would believe a foster kid over the Hilgrams with their perfect reputation? Carriette must have seen my panic. Her hand moved to her chair's control stick, the one she supposedly couldn't operate independently. The chair hummed to life, backing up smoothly. Another lie exposed. She could move just fine when the meds wore off enough. She rolled to the bookshelf and pointed up, not at the books, but at the smoke detector. Its red light blinked steadily, but something was off. The light was too bright, too focused. Another camera. Of course. The whole downstairs was probably wired. Mrs. Hilgram had watched me switch Joe's pills. She'd seen me upload the files. She knew everything. A door opened upstairs. Slow footsteps. Deliberate. Not trying to be quiet anymore. Mrs. Hilgram appeared at the top of the stairs in her pink bathrobe, hair still perfectly styled even at midnight. Thomas, she said, voice dripping with false concern. What are you doing up, sweetheart? Did you have another nightmare? I backed toward the kitchen, mind racing. The knife block was too far. The door was locked with a key only she had. My phone was upstairs. The tablet was useless now. I was just getting water. I managed. She descended slowly, each step measured. Water? But you have a water bottle in your room. We talked about this. Wandering at night is a sign your anxiety is getting worse. I'm fine. Are you? She reached the bottom, blocking my path to the stairs. Because healthy children don't sneak around at night. They don't make up stories. They don't steal things. Her eyes flicked to my pocket. Joe's pills. She knew. I think we need to talk about increasing your medication, she continued. Dr. Morrison has an opening tomorrow. We could discuss inpatient options. Number. The word came out stronger than I felt. I won't let you. Her smile was patient, practiced, the one she used on social workers. Let me? Oh, Thomas. You're a minor in my care. I don't need your permission to get you help. Carriette's chair hummed. She'd positioned herself between us, giving me a gap to squeeze through. Mrs. Hilgram's eyes narrowed. Carriette, sweetheart, what are you doing up? You know you can't operate that chair safely with your medication. But Carriette was already moving, ramming her chair into Mrs. Hilgram's legs. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make her stumble. I bolted for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Thomas, get back here. I burst into Joe's room first. He was awake, sitting up in his dinosaur pajamas. Get dressed, I told him. We're leaving. Now. He didn't question it, just started pulling on his shoes. Down syndrome didn't make him slow. He'd been ready for this moment as long as I had. Rosie's room next. She was already up, fully dressed, backpack in hand. Heard everything, she whispered. Ben's ready too. We gathered in the hallway, 5 kids in pajamas and mismatched clothes, facing a future that couldn't be worse than this house. Mrs. Hilgram appeared at the top of the stairs. Mr. Hilgram behind her now, blocking our path. This is ridiculous, she said. Get back to bed, all of you. No, I said. We're done. The police have everything. Your journal, the recordings, all of it. Her face went white, then red. You ungrateful little, what's going on? Mr. Hilgram interrupted, looking genuinely confused. Helen, what journal? She spun on him. Not now, David. But his expression was changing, pieces clicking together. All those medical setbacks, all those canceled appointments, his wife's insistence on handling all the medications. Helen, he said slowly, what did you do? She turned on him with venom in her eyes, but before she could speak, I seized the moment. I pushed past them both, the other kids following close behind. Mrs. Hilgram lunged for my arm, her nails digging into my skin, but Joe barreled into her side with surprising force. She stumbled against the wall, and we ran. The front door was locked, as always. Triple deadbolts that needed keys from the inside. We scattered through the house, Mrs. Hilgram's footsteps pounding after us. I headed for the kitchen window, the one with the broken latch she'd been meaning to fix for months. Behind me, I heard crashes and thuds. Ben had knocked over the hallway table, his blindness an advantage as he navigated by memory, while Mrs. Hilgram stumbled in the dark. Rosie triggered one of her fake seizures, dropping to the floor and forcing Mr. Hilgram to stop and check on her. Years of practice had taught us all how to use our supposed weaknesses as weapons. The kitchen window stuck halfway up. I shoved harder, the old wood groaning. Mrs. Hilgram appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with rage. She grabbed a knife from the block, not to hurt us, I realized, but to keep us from leaving. The blade glinted as she advanced. Carriette's wheelchair slammed into the back of Mrs. Hilgram's knees. She went down hard, the knife skittering across the linoleum. Carriette's eyes were fierce, her hands steady on the controls. All those months of pretending she couldn't operate the chair independently had been practice for this moment. I got the window open and boosted Joe through first. His small frame fit easily. Rosie went next, then Ben, feeling his way with practiced ease. I turned back for Carriette, but she was already backing up, positioning her chair. Mrs. Hilgram struggled to her feet, reaching for Carriette. Mr. Hilgram stood frozen in the doorway, his world crumbling as he watched his wife's mask finally slip completely. She wasn't the devoted mother mother he believed in. She was something else entirely. I ran to Carriette, but she shook her head firmly. Her fingers moved quickly in sign language. Go, get help, I'll stall. Mrs. Hilgram grabbed the back of Carriette's chair, trying to pull her away from the window. Carriette suddenly went limp, her full weight sagging in the chair. It was a move she'd perfected over years, making herself impossibly heavy and difficult to move. Mrs. Hilgram struggled with the dead weight. I climbed through the window, landing hard on the grass outside. The others were already running toward the street. I looked back to see Carriette still blocking Mrs. Hilgram's path. Mr. Hilgram finally moving to intervene, pulling his wife back. We ran through the dark neighborhood, our bare feet slapping against cold pavement. No shoes, no coats, just the clothes on our backs and the truth nobody wanted to believe. Joe wheezed beside me, his heart condition real even if Mrs. Hilgram had been making it worse. I slowed to match his pace. The nearest house with lights on was 3 blocks away. I pounded on the door while the others huddled behind me. An elderly woman answered, taking in our appearance with widening eyes. 5 kids in pajamas, barefoot, one of them blind, another struggling to breathe. I explained quickly, words tumbling over each other. Foster kids, medication tampering, evidence sent to police. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. She ushered us inside, already reaching for her phone. Her living room was warm and normal, with doilies on the armchairs and photos of grandchildren on the mantel. We collapsed onto her sofa while she called 911. I heard her giving the address, describing us, using words like endangered and medical emergency. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Hilgram's car creeping down the street. She was looking for us, hunting us like we were possessions that had escaped. The elderly woman saw it too and quickly drew the curtains. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers who looked skeptical until they saw Joe's labored breathing and the raw fear in our eyes. I showed them the confirmation number from the anonymous tip, explained about the evidence in the cloud accounts. 1 officer stayed with us while the other went to the house. An ambulance came for Joe. The paramedics checked his vitals, frowning at his elevated heart rate. They found the pills in my pocket, the ones I'd switched out, and bagged them as evidence. Joe squeezed my hand before they loaded him into the ambulance. More police arrived, a social worker, questions and more questions. They separated us to get our individual stories, but we'd lived this nightmare together. Our accounts matched because they were true. Hours passed in a blur of fluorescent lights and official forms. They brought us juice boxes and blankets. A detective arrived with printed screenshots from my cloud accounts. Mrs. Hilgram's journal entries. Mrs. Hilgram's midnight fashion choice of pink bathrobe plus knife really shows how quickly caring mother can switch to horror movie villain, though credit to Carriette for turning that wheelchair into the world's most effective battering ram against evil foster moms. Photos of medication bottles, the birthday party video. Dawn was breaking when they finally told us what happened at the house. Mrs. Hilgram had barricaded herself in the bathroom. Mr. Hilgram was cooperating fully, showing them the medication cabinet, the altered prescriptions, the cameras he claimed he didn't know were recording. Carriette was safe, on her way to the hospital for evaluation. They found more than just our medications. Mrs. Hilgram had been stockpiling substances for years, ordering from multiple pharmacies, using different doctors. The scope of her operation was staggering. How many children had she done this to before us? How many had never escaped? The hospital became our temporary home. Real doctors ran real tests. They found therapeutic levels of unnecessary substances in all our systems. Muscle relaxants for Carriette, sedatives for Rosie, heart medications Joe didn't need. Even Ben had traces of antibiotics that would cause the infections before his surgeries. The withdrawal was brutal. Our bodies had become dependent on medications we'd never needed. Carriette's muscles seized and cramped as the relaxants left her system. Rosie couldn't sleep without the sedatives. Joe's heart raced and slowed unpredictably. We were all sick, but it was a healing kind of sick. Our bodies remembering how to function on their own. Dr. Morrison was arrested 3 days later. They found communications between him and Mrs. Hilgram, discussing dosages and symptoms. He'd been prescribing whatever she asked for, collecting insurance payments for conditions we didn't have. His license was suspended pending investigation. The other families from the adoption support group started coming forward. Little things they'd noticed but dismissed. Children who'd gotten worse instead of better. Therapies that suddenly stopped working. Mrs. Hilgram had been giving advice, recommending doctors, sharing her expertise. How deep did this go? Mr. Hilgram filed for divorce from his hospital bed. He'd had a mild heart attack when they'd shown him the full extent of his wife's crimes. He claimed complete ignorance, and maybe that was true. Maybe he'd wanted to believe so badly in their perfect family that he'd blinded himself to the truth. We testified via video link from a safe location, not in court, but to investigators building the case. Mrs. Hilgram watched from across the table, her lawyer beside her. She still wore her perfect mother costume, pearls, and pressed clothes, but the mask had slipped. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She tried to claim mental illness. Munchausen by proxy, her lawyer argued, a disease that made her hurt children to get attention. But the journal entries showed clear planning, careful research. This wasn't illness. This was cruelty wrapped in love. The investigation expanded. Other children she'd fostered before Poppy. Some had aged out of the system, carrying mysterious chronic conditions that miraculously improved once they left her care. Others hadn't been so lucky. There were graves to be exhumed, tiny bodies to be tested for toxins. We stayed together through it all. The state tried to separate us, place us in different homes, but we refused. We'd survived by protecting each other. We weren't about to stop now. They found us a group home that could handle all our needs. Real needs this time. Carriette's recovery was miraculous. Without the muscle relaxants, she began walking independently within weeks. Her speech cleared. The brilliant girl who'd been trapped inside a failing body finally got to shine. She was reading at college level, solving complex math problems, making up for lost time. Joe's heart condition was real, but manageable. Proper medication, not the cocktail Mrs. Hilgram had been feeding him, kept him stable. He joined a special needs basketball team, running up and down the court with pure joy on his face. Rosie's seizures were rare and controlled. She started painting during her recovery, creating abstract pieces that captured the feeling of being trapped in your own body. A local gallery offered to show them, calling her a prodigy. Ben had never needed those surgeries. His blindness was permanent, but it had never been degenerative like Mrs. Hilgram claimed. He learned to use a cane, then a guide dog. He started writing music, composing by ear, turning our trauma into something beautiful. And me? I struggled with trust. Every med looked like poison. Every caring adult felt like a threat. Therapy helped, but healing isn't linear. Some days I woke up sure I was back in that house, that my freedom was the dream. The trial date approached like a storm on the horizon. We'd have to face her again, tell our story to a jury who might not believe us. Kids with disabilities make unreliable witnesses, her lawyer would argue. How could we trust memories formed under the influence of so many substances? But we had the evidence, mountains of it. Every med she'd ordered, every appointment she'd canceled, every improvement she'd sabotaged. The prosecution built their case methodically, brick by brick, creating a wall of truth she couldn't break through. More families came forward. A couple from 3 states away whose adopted daughter had mysteriously developed seizures after attending a conference where Mrs. Hilgram spoke. A single father whose son's autism symptoms had worsened after following her recommended treatment plan. The pattern was clear and devastating. Mrs. Hilgram's support group dissolved in scandal. Some members had genuinely not known, horrified to discover they'd been taking advice from a monster. Others, though, had suspected, had maybe even participated. The investigation widened, a web of medical abuse spanning years and states. We moved to a new placement closer to the courthouse, a therapeutic foster home run by a couple who'd adopted several kids with disabilities. They were everything the Hillgrams had pretended to be, patient and loving without the cameras and Facebook posts. I started high school that fall, a normal kid with an abnormal past. The other students didn't know my story, and I liked it that way. I joined the computer club, using the skills I'd learned gathering evidence for something positive. Coding felt like control, creating order from chaos. The others thrived too. Carriette started mainstream school, years behind but catching up fast. Joe made friends who saw past his diagnosis to the sweet kid underneath. Rosie's art evolved, becoming more hopeful. Ben's compositions grew complex and beautiful, but the trial loomed. Our new foster parents prepared us carefully. We practiced our testimonies, not to memorize lies but to find words for the truth. How do you explain the horror of being poisoned by someone who claimed to love you? How do you make a jury understand the theft of your potential? Mrs. Hillgram hired the best lawyers money could buy. They filed motion after motion, trying to suppress evidence, dismiss charges, claim incompetence. Each hearing was a battle, but the judge saw through the legal maneuvering. The trial would proceed. We visited Joe in the hospital the day before opening statements. He'd had a setback, his heart struggling with the stress. The doctors assured us he'd be fine, but seeing him hooked to monitors brought it all back. The helplessness, the fear, the rage at what she'd stolen from us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I reviewed my testimony one more time, the words I'd have to say while she watched. Part of me wanted to run, to hide, to pretend none of it had happened. But Carriette knocked on my door, walking steadily on legs that worked now because we'd fought back. She sat on my bed, not speaking at first. Then she signed slowly, making sure I understood every word. We survived her. We'll survive this too, together. The others joined us, a pile of kids on my narrow bed. Joe was missing, but we video called him from the hospital. We didn't talk about tomorrow. We just existed together, drawing strength from our shared survival. Morning came too soon. We dressed carefully in the clothes the court advocate had helped us choose. Respectable, but not too formal. We looked like what we were, kids who'd been through hell but refused to be defined by it. The courthouse steps seemed endless. Reporters clustered outside, shouting questions we'd been told not to answer. Our foster parents formed a protective wall around us, guiding us through the chaos. Inside, the halls echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood paneling and uncomfortable benches. The judge's bench loomed at the front, American flag hanging limp beside it. We filed into the victims section, social workers and advocates surrounding us like armor. Then she entered, Mrs. Hillgram in a conservative suit, hair pulled back, makeup subtle. She looked like a Sunday school teacher, not a woman who'd systematically poisoned children. Her eyes swept over us, and for a moment, I saw something flicker there. Not remorse, annoyance. We were supposed to be too broken to fight back. The prosecutor's opening statement was clinical, laying out facts like autopsy reports, 5 children, years of abuse, medical evidence, financial records, a pattern of escalating harm. The defense countered with mental illness, miscommunication, loving intentions gone wrong. Then it was our turn. One by one, we'd tell our stories. The bailiff called my name first, and I stood on legs that felt like water. The walk to the witness stand stretched forever. My hand shook as I raised it to swear the oath. From the stand, I could see everything. Mrs. Hillgram at the defense table, fingers drumming silently. The jury watching with careful eyes. My siblings in the gallery, Carriette signing encouragement. Ben's face turned toward my voice. The prosecutor started with easy questions. My name, my age, how long I'd lived with the Hillgrams. Then we dove deeper. The way Thomas describes Mrs. Hillgram's fingers drumming at the defense table makes me wonder if that's a nervous habit, or if she's still trying to control something, even now when everything's been exposed. How does someone keep pretending after all that evidence? The first time I'd noticed something wrong, the medication switches, the journal. Each word felt like pulling glass from a wound, necessary but painful. The defense attorney tried to twist my words. Was I sure I'd seen correctly? Could medications have been confused accidentally? Wasn't I grateful for the home they'd provided? I kept my answers simple, truthful. Let the evidence speak where my words might fail. Carriette testified next, her voice clear and strong. She described years of being trapped in a body that could work, but wasn't allowed to. The frustration of trying to communicate while drugged into submission. The joy of finally walking freely, speaking clearly, being heard. Joe testified from his hospital bed via video link. Even through the screen, his sweetness shone through. He talked about trusting Mrs. Hillgram with his medications, believing she was helping him. The betrayal when he realized she'd been making him sicker. Rosie's testimony was artistic, painting word pictures of consciousness flickering in and out. She described the sensation of fake seizures versus real ones, how Mrs. Hillgram had taught her to perform illness until she couldn't tell the difference anymore. Ben's testimony was the hardest. He couldn't see Mrs. Hillgram, but he could hear her breathing, recognize the pattern from years of living in fear. He talked about infections that burned, surgeries scheduled and canceled, vision that was gone but didn't have to get worse. The medical experts came next. Toxicologists explaining substance interactions, pediatricians detailing the harm to developing bodies, psychiatrists discussing the psychological damage of medical abuse. The evidence mounted like snowdrifts, cold and undeniable. Mrs. Hillgram's journal entries were read aloud, her own words condemning her, plans to increase dosages, research on permanent damage, notes about which children were worth keeping and which were becoming too much trouble. The jury's faces hardened with each page. The defense presented their case. Character witnesses who'd known the public Mrs. Hillgram, experts on Munchausen by proxy, attempts to humanize a woman who treated children like experiments. But the evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. Mr. Hillgram testified for the prosecution. He looked broken, aged a decade in months. He admitted to signs he'd ignored, red flags he'd explained away. His guilt was genuine, but it didn't excuse his blindness. We'd needed protection, and he'd failed to provide it. Dr. Morrison pleaded guilty mid-trial, agreeing to testify in exchange for a lighter sentence. His testimony revealed the depth of the conspiracy. Mrs. Hillgram had coached him on diagnoses, provided symptom lists, even suggested specific medications. He'd gone along for the money, the reputation as a specialist in complex cases. The trial stretched on for weeks. Each day brought new revelations, more evidence of systematic abuse. Other doctors came forward, realizing they'd been manipulated. Pharmacists who'd filled suspicious prescriptions. Teachers who'd noticed children getting worse instead of better. We attended when we could, supporting each other through the hardest testimonies. Some days were too much, and we stayed home, working on homework or art or music. Healing doesn't pause for justice. The prosecution's closing argument was passionate but grounded in facts. 5 children robbed of health potential, childhood itself. A woman who'd weaponized love turned care into control. A system that had failed to protect its most vulnerable. The defense made one last plea for sympathy. Mental illness, good intentions, a mother's love twisted by disease. But the jury had seen the journal, heard our testimonies. They knew the truth. Deliberations took 3 days. 3 days of waiting, wondering, worrying that somehow she'd escape justice. We stayed close to each other, playing board games and watching movies, pretending we weren't constantly checking our phones for updates. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. We sat in the courtroom, hands hands linked like a chain. The foreman stood, paper trembling in his hands. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The word repeated for each count, each child, each crime. Guilty of aggravated child abuse, guilty of assault, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of things that had no name but had stolen years from our lives. Mrs. Hilgram didn't react. She sat perfectly still, the same practiced smile frozen on her face. Even in defeat, she maintained her performance. But we saw through it now. Everyone did. Sentencing came a month later. The judge spoke about betrayal of trust, vulnerability of victims, lack of remorse, life in prison with possibility of parole after 25 years. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. We gave victim impact statements. Not required, but we wanted our voices heard one last time. We talked about what had been taken and what we'd reclaimed, about nightmares and hope, about surviving and thriving despite her best efforts to break us. As they led her away in handcuffs, Mrs. Hilgram finally looked at us directly. No smile this time, just cold calculation, already planning her appeals. But we'd won. We'd fought back and won. Outside the courthouse, the air felt cleaner. Reporters wanted statements, but we were done talking. We walked away together, 5 kids who'd refused to be victims. The February sun was weak but warming, hinting at spring. Our foster parents took us for ice cream, a strange celebration for a strange victory. We sat in the parlor, comparing flavors and planning futures. Carriette wanted to be a doctor, a real one. Joe dreamed of coaching basketball. Rosie had art school applications. Ben was composing a symphony. And me? I wanted to help kids like us, kids trapped in situations nobody believed. The system that had failed us was changing, slowly. New protocols for medical foster homes, better oversight of prescriptions, training for social workers to spot medical abuse. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. We stayed in touch as we grew older, scattered to different schools and cities but bound by shared survival. We celebrated each other's victories, real ones this time. Carriette's medical school acceptance, Joe's wedding, Rosie's gallery opening, Ben's first concert, my degree in social work. The months after sentencing blurred together in a haze of medical appointments and adjustment. Our new foster home operated nothing like the Hilgrams' house. No cameras watching our every move, no locked medicine cabinets, just a normal home where pills came in regular bottles with our actual names on them. Carriette's physical therapy sessions became celebrations of progress rather than staged performances. She attacked each exercise with determination, muscles remembering their proper function as the last traces of unnecessary relaxants left her system. Within 6 weeks, she ditched the wheelchair completely. The therapist called it remarkable. We called it freedom. Joe's cardiologist adjusted his medication properly, finding the right balance for his actual condition. His energy returned gradually, then all at once. The basketball team welcomed him with open arms, and he threw himself into practice with an intensity that surprised everyone. His coach pulled me aside after the first game, amazed at his stamina. I just smiled, knowing Joe had always had it in him. The state assigned us a new social worker, Isabella, who actually listened. She visited weekly at first, watching for signs of trauma or regression. Instead, she found kids healing at their own pace. She helped navigate the complex world of victim compensation funds and educational accommodations. Real help, not the checkbox visits we'd grown used to. Rosie's art evolved from dark abstracts to vibrant explosions of color. The local gallery owner who'd shown interest became a mentor, teaching her technique while encouraging her unique perspective. Her paintings sold well enough to start a small college fund. She painted one piece specifically for each of us, capturing our journey from darkness to light without words. Ben's guide dog arrived in October. A golden retriever named Sebastian who seemed to understand his role went beyond navigation. He became Ben's constant companion, leading him through school hallways and lying quietly during music composition sessions. Ben's symphony grew movement by movement, each section reflecting a different aspect of our experience. School presented its own challenges. The other students knew something about our past, whispers following us through hallways. Foster kids were common enough, but our story had made local news despite efforts to protect our identities. Not the sensational coverage Mrs. Hilgram might have generated with her perfect parent facade, just a brief mention of children removed from dangerous situation, foster mother arrested for medical abuse. I threw myself into coding, finding solace in logical problems with clear solutions. The computer club teacher recognized my intensity and started giving me advanced projects. I built a secure communication app, thinking of all the kids who might need to gather evidence like I had. He suggested entering it in the state science fair. I declined, preferring to work without spotlight. Winter arrived with unexpected normalcy. We carved pumpkins for Halloween, something the Hilgrams had deemed too dangerous with our conditions. Thanksgiving came with genuine gratitude. Our foster parents cooked a simple meal, no performance or documentation required. We ate seconds and thirds, bodies finally able to process food without pharmaceutical interference. The victim services coordinator called in December about restitution hearings. Mrs. Hilgram's assets had been frozen pending civil proceedings. The house, the cars, the savings accumulated through fraudulent disability payments. It would be divided among her victims, those still alive to claim it. Something feels different about how calculated Mrs. Hilgram stays even after being found guilty. That frozen smile during the verdict makes me wonder if she truly understands what she's done, or if she's still performing for an audience that no longer exists. The amount wouldn't be life-changing, but it might cover some college expenses or therapy costs. Dr. Morrison's medical practice shut down after his license revocation. Other doctors who'd been manipulated came forward, reviewing their records for signs they'd missed. A task force formed to examine prescription patterns at local pharmacies. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. The system that had failed us was trying to learn. We attended some of the support group meetings for families affected by medical abuse. Not many, the memories still too raw, but seeing other kids who'd survived similar experiences helped. One girl showed Carriette her college acceptance letter, pre-med program. Another boy played piano like Ben, fingers dancing across keys with hard-won freedom. Survival looked different for everyone. Mr. Hilgram reached out through lawyers, wanting to apologize in person. We declined as a group, but I wrote him a letter. Not forgiveness, that wasn't mine to give. Just acknowledgement that willful blindness could be its own kind of abuse. He needed to live with that knowledge. We needed to live without him. Spring semester brought new challenges. Carriette tested into advanced placement classes, her brilliant mind finally free to soar. She struggled with the social aspects, years of forced dependence having stunted her peer relationships, but she persevered, joining the debate team where her analytical skills shone. Joe made varsity basketball as a sophomore, unprecedented for someone with Down syndrome at our school. He played with joy that infected his teammates. At the championship game, when he sank the winning free throw, the crowd erupted. Not inspiration pern, not pity applause, just recognition of an athlete who'd fought for his place on the court. Rosie's seizures stabilized on proper medication, occurring rarely and with warning signs she'd learned to recognize. She started teaching art to younger kids at the community center, passing on the healing she'd found through creation. Her students adored her, unaware of her history, seeing only the kind teacher who understood feeling trapped inside yourself. Ben's symphony premiered at the State Youth Orchestra competition. He conducted it himself, moving with confidence through space he'd mapped in his mind. The piece was complex, layered with themes of confinement and liberation. The judges awarded it second place. Ben was thrilled, already planning his next composition. I started volunteering at the crisis hotline, using skills learned in our darkest moments to help other kids in danger. The training was intense, bringing up memories I tried to bury. But every call I answered, every kid I helped find resources, felt like turning our trauma into something useful. The civil case against Mrs. Hilgram's estate moved slowly through the system. Her lawyer tried various defenses, claiming mental illness should absolve financial liability. The judge disagreed. The fraudulent disability payments alone totaled hundreds of thousands over the years. Add in pain and suffering, medical costs for proper treatment, and the amount grew substantial. We met with the prosecutor one last time before the case closed. She showed us letters from other victims who'd come forward after the trial. Kids from years past, now adults, who'd carried mysterious illnesses until distance from the Hilgrams brought clarity. The investigation had revealed at least 12 victims over 2 decades. We were just the ones who'd escaped. Summer arrived with possibility instead of dread. No more strategic medication increases before family vacations. No more staged medical emergencies for sympathy and attention. Just 5 teenagers planning normal futures. College applications, summer jobs, first relationships conducted without pharmaceutical interference. Our foster parents announced they were adopting a new child, a 6-year-old with cerebral palsy whose birth parents had died. We helped prepare his room, painting it bright colors and installing grab bars that actually helped rather than imprisoned. When he arrived, wheelchair-bound but bright-eyed, we surrounded him with the protection we'd wished for ourselves. The restitution checks arrived in July, smaller than expected after legal fees, but still significant. Carriette put hers toward pre-med textbooks. Joe bought proper basketball gear and saved the rest. Rosie invested in art supplies and studio space. Ben upgraded his music equipment. I banked mine for college, planning to study social work and computer science. August brought endings and beginnings. I aged out of the foster system, technically an adult though still feeling like that scared 12-year-old who discovered a journal full of horrors. Our foster parents offered to let me stay through college. I accepted gratefully, not ready to leave the only real family I'd known. The others had time left in the system, but their futures looked bright. Carriette had 2 years until 18, already planning her path to medical school. Joe would stay until 21, protected by provisions for kids with developmental disabilities. Rosie and Ben had similar timelines, support systems in place for their genuine needs. 9. We gathered in my room the night before I started college classes, the same way we'd huddled together during the trial. No words needed, just presence. We'd survived the unsurvivable, escaped a prison disguised as love. The scars remained, might always remain, but we'd learned the difference between healing and harm, between real care and performed concern. I looked at each of them, these kids who'd become my true siblings through shared trauma and mutual protection. Carriette signed something that made the others laugh. Joe demonstrated his new free throw technique. Rosie sketched us all together. Ben hummed a melody that would probably become his next piece. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. College courses, continued therapy, navigating a world that didn't quite know what to do with our story. But tonight, we were just kids who'd saved each other when the adults failed. Kids who'd learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you most can hurt you worst. Kids who discovered that real family isn't about blood or adoption certificates, but about who shows up when escape seems impossible. The Hilgrams had tried to keep us sick, dependent, forever theirs. Instead, they'd created fighters who knew our own strength. We'd probably spend years in therapy untangling the damage. Some days would be harder than others. Recovery isn't linear, and trauma doesn't vanish with a verdict. But we were free. Free to be sick when we were actually sick. Healthy when we were actually healthy. Free to succeed or fail on our own terms. Free to choose our own medications, our own doctors, our own futures. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. I started college the next week, laptop in my backpack and determination in my heart. The other kids went back to school, continued their activities, lived their lives. We texted daily, sharing victories and setbacks. A network of survivors who understood what others couldn't. Mrs. Hilgram would serve her time, planning appeals that would likely fail. The system that enabled her was changing slowly. Other kids would hopefully be safer. But mostly, we just focused on moving forward, not forgetting, never forgetting, but not letting her steal any more of our lives. Some stories end with justice served and heroes triumphant. Ours ended with 5 kids learning to trust pills again, celebrating real achievements instead of performed struggles, and discovering that survival itself was victory enough. We'd been collected like broken dolls for a twisted woman's playhouse. We'd left as young adults who knew our own worth, medication-free and futureful. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Well, folks, that's our time together. And what a clever little journey it's been. Appreciate you letting me toss in my quick quips and smart remarks along the way. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.